I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host. It's the 29th of April, 2014. My very special guest today is a, friend that I've known for some time here in Utah, in Salt Lake area. His name's Jake Shannon, very interesting character who's done a lot of stuff that I dare not try to cover all in my little introduction here. Hypnotist, one of the things I really want to talk about today, and actually is available for consulting on hypnotism, and helps a lot of people quit smoking and things like that. We'll definitely get into that. He hosted the Jake Shannon radio show here on Utah's AM 630 K-Talk radio show, which is the radio station that I was on for a while as sort of a guest host every once in a while, until I started saying things that they didn't like. And let's see, founder of scientificwrestling.com, which is, if you've never heard of Catch as Catch Can or Catch Wrestling, Jake kind of became a guru, if you will, a historian and a coach for this type of wrestling, which spawned a bunch of other things. Again, we'll talk about that. Lives in Salt Lake City with his wife and 3 children, lots of businesses, and also lots of books, of which I have a couple. The 2 books I specifically have are Anomaly and Teocon, which is another one I'll definitely want to talk about, because the Tea Party, of course, whether it was ever a real entity or not, was certainly hijacked by both the media and politics. Anyway, Jake, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Clint. Man, I'm really, thanks for having me on, and I'm just really stoked that you have your own show.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Well, let's talk about, first of all, your books. You've been writing for some time. Your books are available on Amazon.com, and if you just type in Amazon.com/Jake Shannon, it should bring that up. Well, let's start with your Catch as Catch Can. What is Catch as Catch Can wrestling?
Well, okay. So, Catch Wrestling, or Catch as Catch Can Wrestling, is a Western style of martial art that's either, however you look at it, it could be a complement or it could be a competitor to things like, jiu-jitsu or, kickboxing or something like that. But it's a sport. It's a combat sport, and it originated in, again, and this is where the history gets a little spotty. As far back as we can trace it, recorded it, we have an idea it came from Ireland into the north of England, but it was really when it settled into the north of England in a little town called Wigan in the county of Lancashire. And it's really simple, actually. If you think about the rules that you see in pro wrestling, like WWE or whatever, if you think of those rules, but instead of feather boa bodybuilders putting on pantomime, and imagine it as a real sport, where basically you win with a pin or a submission, kind of like UFC or whatever. No punching or kicking and no points or anything of that nature. That is the basic rules of Catch as Catch Can. So it's a submission grappling style that's originally a Western style of martial arts. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Well, and it sounds like these other the ones you just mentioned are sort of breakoffs of that particular style.
Yeah, like pro wrestling obviously comes from it. There's a very strong argument to be made that, and to be honest, if it weren't for mixed martial arts and the UFC, I probably wouldn't even be involved in Catch as Catch Can as deeply as I am. But there's a very strong case to be made that it was catch wrestling or Catch as Catch Can that was also the forebearer of mixed martial arts and UFC. There was two promotions that started that. One was the UFC back in '94, and then about a month before the UFC ever had its first show, there was a Japanese version called Pancrase, and Pancrase was definitely directly from Catch as Catch Can. I mean, that's not even deniable. And then even what you see in the Olympics, like the freestyle, or in high school or college we call it folk style here in the United States, all of that traces its roots right back to the this Catch as Catch Can style.
Well, the two books that I see just off the top there are Physical Chess, My Life in Catch as Can Wrestling, which looks like you co-authored, and then Say Uncle, Catch as Catch Can Wrestling, and the Roots of Ultimate Fighting, Pro Wrestling, and Modern Grappling. So obviously that's sounds like a pretty good theory.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. They've actually, both of them have been, now they've been out, I think, since like at least 2011 or 2012. I can't remember the exact publish date. But for like well over like a year and a half, they just had strong legs, man. And in the Amazon rankings, they were both books in the top 10 for quite a while in the categories for wrestling and for mixed martial arts. So, I mean, go figure. You never know what people will be into. But it's pretty obscure, but it's fun. It takes me around the world. I travel and give seminars, and I work with a lot of like, really, really big name guys, and it's kind of a dream come true, and it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what people might not know about Jake Shannon is his career, if you will, in financial areas, financial engineering, as we like to call it, and then of course. You were the head guy in Utah for the Libertarian Party. You were it, man. You were the chairman, right?
Well, yeah, but that's like coming in third place in a race, and first and second place finished in an hour, and it took you like 5 hours to finish. I mean, that's not. But, you know what I mean? It's not really that.
You made a good attempt, though. I mean, you ran for U.S. House of Representatives in our 3rd congressional district here, right?
Yeah, I mean.
So you tried.
This is my view on politics. It's a total disaster. It's a giant poop sandwich that we all got to take a bite of, unfortunately. But I try to minimize my connection to any of it because it is a disaster. It's just a negative vibe thing. But things have gotten so bad here, and I don't need to tell you this, but maybe just for the for your audience, I mean, obviously things have gotten so bad here in the States that you really almost do have to get involved just because it's so crazy. Now, I never really had any hopes that we would actually get anybody elected, I mean, it would have been great. I mean, we really did everything we could, but we had no money as a third party. And anyway, the benefit that I find in a third party, this is something I picked up from Ron Paul.
And you did run as a libertarian, right?
I ran for U.S. Congress against Jason Chaffetz, and I did pretty well. Actually, the Provo Herald ran a poll, and I came in second above the Democratic candidate, and yet somehow when the debate that the Provo Herald put on, they invited the Democrat and Republican, and I wasn't invited. So, I mean, in their own poll, I came in second, but I wasn't invited to debates. But that's
surprise.
So, what I learned was this, I mean, in a nutshell, was that from Ron Paul, I saw, here's a guy who doesn't ever win, at least for the presidency. But he was able to use it as a giant bullhorn to wake people up to these ideas, these concepts, with regards to human liberty. And that really inspired me a lot. And that was my only reason for getting involved. I mean, I could not handle it if I actually got elected and had to go to D.C. and hang out with all those windbags, man.
It would be like going to the devil's den. It would be horrible, I would think. But, hey, folks, stay tuned. We're going to be back with Jake Shannon. Stay tuned.
Looking around you, we're lost in space, and the earth is your home.
right, folks, welcome back here in the Corporation Nation. My very special guest today, friend and colleague, Jake Shannon, JakeShannon.com. I got to tell you, Jake, you get my vote for one of the coolest websites, website designs, anyway. Very, very, very cool site, JakeShannon.com. And there's so many things I want to talk to you about because you've participated in so many things and created so many things. But let's stick to the libertarian aspect here and the political stuff. And we go back to your book list, and one of the books that I actually have here in front of me is Teocons, The Hijacking of Liberty in America, and the subtitle is Exposing the Neoconservative Infiltration and Takeover of the 21st Century Tea Party Movement. That's a fairly strong suggestion. Why don't you explain what you mean by that?
Well, okay, so, and it's very interesting because we first met, actually, when you were putting on the Axiom Conference
yes.
in Salt Lake because of my first book, Anomaly. And so my second book that I put out, that was non-wrestling related anyway, was this Teocon. And that was a play off of, obviously mashing the word Tea Party into the word neoconservative, and creating, it wasn't my idea. I found it, a young lady had created that idea, but I thought it was a brilliant concept. So anyway, I wrote this book, and I was pretty stoked because I actually was able to get it out and published. I was the first person to publish a book on the Tea Party, the modern Tea Party. And it's not a big book, but what it talks about, from a very young age, I've always been fascinated by this idea of, it's in the French, it's détournement is the name for hijacking of politics or ideas, or, it had one meaning and then you kind of twist it to mean something else. And I was excited because I saw Ron Paul, as we were alluding to earlier, using the electoral process to educate people. He wasn't really so concerned with winning. I mean, he would have been stoked to win, but he was really smart to use it as a didactic process and really woke up a lot of people. I mean, I've been libertarian for 20 years, just philosophically, not necessarily with the political party, but I've been libertarian for well over 20 years. And before Ron Paul, it was Ayn Rand was the big gateway drug into liberty thinking. Well, Ron Paul really, man, he did such a great job using the political process. Well, what I saw was how that freaked out the establishment, and they just unleashed the hounds right away by having both Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin, who graced the cover of my book in cartoon form, looking like the Joker from that first Batman movie. But they kind of unleashed Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin and a few others to kind of infiltrate the nascent movement, the Tea Party, which started out very libertarian. And by the time they were done, I mean, they were very much the typical, pulled right back into the Republican Party, the neoconservative. And for people who don't know what the neoconservatives are, it's very simple. They're Trotskyites, basically communists that infiltrated the right wing. And, they're Republican socialists. So, these big government Republicans, these warfare Republicans.
Well, wouldn't you say that the problem with the libertarianism, which is more of a way of thinking and a lifestyle more than anything, wouldn't you say the problem with libertarianism is that it's pretty much not pro big business and pro anything? It's more of a way, can't we all just get along kind of thing. And it's not very good as a political party because political parties, of course, are pundits for big corporate, entities and getting things done for a certain elitist group of people. Whereas, how are you gonna promote the libertarianism if it's like sort of a good thing? That would actually be against it.
No, you're totally right. It's definitely a challenge. Again, I think you just have to be thinking of it maybe differently. It's, the Libertarian Party they have these little tiny wins here and there. We can, in Utah, we can lay claim to having the first elected libertarian mayor in the entire country. It was in Utah, which incidentally is funny. He's an openly gay man, and he's a great guy. He's a really sharp guy, smart guy, did a great job, was elected to Bigwater, which is a kind of a polygamous town. So here we have an openly gay guy getting elected in a kind of small town. Yeah, polygamous town. And one day I was talking to him, and I was like, well, his name's Willie Marshall. I said, Willie, excuse me. I said, Willie, what was a bigger liability to you running and getting elected? Being openly gay or being libertarian? And he didn't even bat an eye. He's like, oh my gosh, being libertarian was a much bigger handicap. So what you're saying is dead on, because libertarians typically, I mean, I consider you, I know that you probably don't maybe necessarily self-identify, or it's not a big part of your identity, but I consider you part of the liberty movement and a libertarian. And that type of person that's drawn to liberty is fiercely independent and is an individualist and doesn't really want to belong to a group. And
Exactly.
So when you enter, you have a bunch of people who don't want to belong to a group try to battle group warfare, you're just at a disadvantage. So I totally agree with that, what you're saying. It's like herding cats.
That's why I kind of said, when I went to the party, I thought, I'll try this political party thing, and I'll go to the Libertarian Party. I knew I couldn't be a part of the other ones because they're just ridiculous. But I tried the Libertarian Party. And my impression wasn't an offensive impression. It was just, well, now I can see kind of why this will never take off. I mean, not never, but I mean, my description of Libertarian Party was a bunch of people who get together, have some, well, maybe not so much in this town, some coffee, and basically are unorganized in their efforts to be politicians. More like a liberty meeting than a political, try to vote, get me elected meeting, I guess. And it's not a bad thing. It's just if, those who are organized are generally going to be the winners. And when I say organized, I really mean organized crime.
Well, it's like if you watch the original Star Wars movies. It's like the libertarians are the ragtag rebels, and then like you have like the Death Star. They have all these great resources. They have all this stuff. The libertarians. I will say this though. For example, we have like at least in Utah, we elected a guy to mayor, and he did a lot of great things that are stripping back government or whatnot. Now, of course, the second he leaves, the next guy ruins all that. But for the last election, our guy who ran against in that race with Matheson and Mia Love for the U.S. House of Representatives, he played spoiler, and he ruined Mia Love's chance of getting into office. So now, whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, I can't really speak to that, because either way, it's like you want to get poked in the left eye or the right eye. I mean, both of them suck. But
the pessimist would say, well, he helped get Matheson elected.
Right. So, I mean, it depends how you want to spin it. But just any time I could give the establishment a hard time, it's a win. And the Libertarian Party, the way I look at it, all we have to do is maintain ballot access, and we remain a voice, because we do get debates, we do get press time that we normally wouldn't get for these ideas. So I think the shift is to, at least the shift the perspective that I take is that it's not about actually winning per se, which would be great, and we can work as hard as we can to do that, but it's really about using it as a platform, just like a radio show, using it to educate people. Yeah,
it's an established platform that really someone, I don't know, infamous or famous needs to really take hold of for it to ever get anywhere, really. Unfortunately, and until then, it's exactly what you're saying, is it's a platform for, if you will, quote-unquote, free speech, I guess. But, all right, stay tuned, folks. Got a lot more to talk about with Jake Shannon, JakeShannon.com. Stay tuned.
Control every aspect of your life through ideological hegemony. But if you think you need guns to stop tyranny, then what you waiting for? We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
Welcome back, folks. Here in the Corporation Nation. Guest today is Jake Shannon, JakeShannon.com. Jake resides here in the lovely Salt Lake City area. I am a little south of that, in the Draper City area, same county though. So Jake, there's a couple more books here that you've written. One in particular I actually didn't see until just now. Another pretty shocking claim here. The book is Endonomics, Default Deflation Derivatives, and the End of the United States as We Know It. Now tell me, Jake, this is not just fear porn. You're actually proving your point, right?
Yeah, here the one thing that I will say is that I did earn my my Master's of Science designation in what's known as financial engineering or quantitative finance or financial mathematics. It has a bunch of different names. It's relatively new field, so they haven't really settled exactly what they're going to call it. But on my diploma, it says Master of Science Financial Engineering. Anyway, because of that, and I worked in investment banking and mortgage banking for a number of years, I've kind of been privy to either a perspective or information, whatever. Bottom line is this. The name Endonomics, I kind of just, Freakonomics was such a big hit. I was like, well, what can I do here? And I thought I was talking about the end of the United States. Now, granted, that's all rather dramatic and whatnot.
As we know it is the
as we know it. But I'm not saying that's going to be a bad thing. It's not a doom and gloom thing. Actually, it's going to be quite a good thing. I have a quote at the beginning by a guy who's kind of the godfather of the peace movement in intellectual circles, anyway, in academic journals and whatnot. Anyway, his and I'm paraphrasing, my memory is not that great. But he basically says, I love the American Republic, but I hate the American Empire. And I feel the exact same way. I think there's so much great stuff about America. And looking at the numbers, it is inevitable. And so in the book, I do, stake my reputation by actually putting a number to it so they can be verified and I can either be proven right or wrong. But by 2025, the United States, as we know it, with the big federal government and whatnot, will cease to exist. And that's largely based off of looking at our debt and our ability to service that debt, to maintain a minimum of paying what we owe on interest alone. And these are numbers. These are not necessarily even controversial numbers. These come from the General Accounting Office, the Congressional Budget Office, and so these are actually fairly non-controversial figures. It's just nobody really seems to be talking about it. And I really felt the impetus to write it because, in libertarianism, everybody seems to be going on and on about inflation, and that's cool. I get it. I understand, and I'm not a fan of inflation. I think it's bad. But, everybody was talking about it when the gold boom kind of happened a couple years ago, which I rode quite nicely and made myself a little profit off of it. And but everybody was talking about, we're going to have hyperinflation, and I just got sick of trying to explain it to people why that was actually not happening. And really, the book is fairly technical, and my style with these more academic books, I have to admit, my style's a little terse, meaning it's a little dense. So while the book is short, it's very, very. I've had the complaint that people had to go to the dictionary a lot, which is not good. As an author, I should be trying to communicate the ideas better. But I think academic economists and whatnot wouldn't have that problem. But nonetheless, we actually are more at a risk for deflation than we are for inflation.
Well, I mean, would it be accurate to say that hyperinflation, if you will, happened a long time ago? I mean, we're compared to what the dollar was worth at one point compared to what it is now. I mean, aren't we like 9,000 times? Isn't that hyperinflation already?
Yeah, no. So what you're bringing up is a very important point. It depends on the time window in which you're talking. Obviously, since 1913 and the Federal Reserve Act and all that kind of business, the dollar has been inflated crazy, especially since 1973 and when we got off when Bretton Woods happened and all that we got off the gold standards. Now, so certainly, I'm not making that would be ridiculous. So I definitely, you're raising a very shrewd point that your time window matters. What I was concerned with was this recent, people like Peter Schiff saying that, gold was going to go to 10,000 and it's just ridiculous. So, the real reason gold went up was basically because China, which is the largest market on the planet, the most populated country on the planet, decriminalized the private ownership of gold right after the turn of the millennium.
They did. And they actually started telling their people to actually start buying the physical gold as well. So they didn't just decriminalize it; they promoted it.
Right. And so, it was actually more of a supply and demand thing. It wasn't because the dollar was being devalued, and so there was just a kind of a signal mix-up. People weren't privy to that fact about kind of the legal change in China, and then what you were saying about them actually giving some sort of incentive to buy. That accounted largely for it, and that's why gold really didn't make it past, $2,000, and then dipped down significantly. So what people don't understand is there's this concept of debt deflation. We have to understand the easiest way to think about this is just to ask the simple question: does hyperinflation benefit a creditor, or is it a detriment to a creditor, like the Federal Reserve? So the Federal Reserve is the one that's actually loaning the money to the Treasury, to our government. Our government goes into debt, and our government has to pay interest to the Federal Reserve. So when you are loaning money, is it in your best interest to devalue money, meaning to get paid back in dollars that are worth less? Of course not. I mean, for example, I have student loans. I would love to pay back the tens of thousands of dollars of student loans that I got for my master's degree with a loaf of bread, because there's been a hyperinflation in that loaf of bread. Because the real value has diminished, but the nominal value stayed the same. So people don't understand these kind of more esoteric and obscure arguments. And so really it's in the Federal Reserve's best interest to encourage deflation. And I go through the book and I show how that's actually kind of happening, and this concept known as debt deflation, that most people understand how money is inflated, but they don't understand how it can be just as easily deflated. So things like credit write-downs and bankruptcies, which are at all-time highs, simply in the same way that they just add zeros and create money, when you write those off, the money disappears. And that's deflation. So the book goes through that, and people, it's not totally academic. There's not a single equation in the whole thing. So if you're concerned enough and want the information, you can get there. But I just have to warn people, it's probably my most technical book.
Well, Anomaly was a bit technical too. We'll get into that. But so let me, just to clarify in strictly layman's terms, we shouldn't sit around, as you said, and hope that hyperinflation suddenly happens so that we can pay off bills. In other words, if the dollar is deflated or devalued, I guess, if you would, if you take a couple zeros off the total debt, it's going to be a full spectrum thing. In other words, my $100,000 loan will also be changed accordingly. In other words, I can't just all of a sudden pay off my debt. The debt value will also change.
Well, think about it this way. Your average American, I mean, this is so not even controversial, is laden with debt, right? Everybody's living paycheck to paycheck. Their credit cards maxed out. They've got
the
mortgages.
Definition of a constitutor is a debtor. So yes.
Right. So everybody, your average American is massively leveraged. They've got a lot of debt. They have a mortgage. They have this, that, and the other thing. So we're wishing for hyperinflation. So let's say my mortgage is $300,000 or something. If all of a sudden, a cup of coffee is $300,000, like the Zimbabwe, it becomes like $1 billion note, I could pay off my mortgage for the equivalent of a couple cups of coffee. I mean, so the establishment, the people who own everything, do not actually want hyperinflation when everybody's in debt.
The creditor will never let it happen.
Hyperinflation benefits debtors. Deflation benefits creditors. So you just have to, if you just understand that, you can kind of do the logic on your own and see why there's no incentive for the Federal Reserve or the world banks in Basel, Switzerland, that are the real problem. The Fed is just, I mean, they're already so far past the Federal Reserve. I mean, they're really at a world central bank level in Basel. Well, they don't. I mean, they're stoked. They want deflation because everybody's going to owe them even more. Debts become more onerous.
Well, I guess all you have to do is ask who's in charge, the debtors or the creditors. So what's going to happen? Probably deflation, right?
Right,
Who
exactly.
controls the debt? Yeah. All right, folks, stay tuned. We have Jake Shannon. Stay tuned.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Maybe if I press this button. Imagine every person that you see is somewhat different from every other person in the world. Some can do some things, some can do others. Did you ever think of the many things you've learned to do? Many things.
Here are the
Did you ever
corporations.
grow anything in the garden?
My guest today, Jake Shannon, JakeShannon.com. Really good website, again, if I didn't mention it before. But, well, Jake, you've got I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of what you do, because I find it so fascinating, and it's so important, I think, to talk about. But quick word about well, actually, let me just throw out a point here and see what your response is. Now, when we're talking about things like the dollar and its value, when we're talking about things like gold and its prospective value as far as the market value, of course, there's the statutory price that the Federal Reserve holds on its gold, and then the certificates for that gold are traded at market value, which is very strange, but it makes them a lot of money. But when we're talking about the market price of gold, I mean, you're talking about a little bank called M.N. Rothschild in the city of London, where the United States has a treasury office, and a bunch of banks and countries getting together and what they call the gold fixing, and they're literally fixing, keyword, the price of gold. If they wanted to, as the fixers of the price, they could say, well, let's just deflate it. Let's bring it down to $2 an ounce tomorrow. Of course they wouldn't do that. It would, incrementalism is their style, and that's how control really happens. So, I mean, couldn't you say the same thing about the dollar and most currencies around the world, that they are just being fixed? That a jubilee could happen tomorrow. If they wanted to, they could write off all the debt, and there could be no debt. I mean, the whole thing, I guess the point is, to be a self-proclaimed economist really means to throw out your best guess at how they're going to fix the price of things. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, because, obviously you and I have talked before, and you've done such great research. You and Burian have done really great research. I mean, I really clicked with Burian the one time I was able to chat with him at the Axiom conference that you put on in 2010.
2010.
And because he's a futures trader. Now, futures traders, a lot of financial engineering has to do with the valuation of derivatives. Obviously, futures are in the derivative market. So anyway, I was really enjoying chatting with him, and the research both of you guys have done has just been brilliant. And really, my point of bringing that up is this, to your point, that one of the ways that they get away with all of this, and when I say they, I mean, I basically mean, the oligarchs of planet Earth. The way that a lot of this is done is through complexity. It is, to navigate this stuff is so complicated. And, obscure accounting, obscure mathematical valuations, and obscure laws. And it's so hard to really put it all together. So
who the hell wants to do it? Why would you want to look at an actuarial? I mean, who the hell wants to
especially,
do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's awful enough when I was making, $150,000 a year to do that crap. And why would I on earth want to do that when I'm not making the money, or anybody for that matter? So, it's a disaster, and it is, they hide in the complexity of all of this, and then, masochists like yourself and myself try to dig through and try to present as best of a snapshot as we possibly can. But it is so complex and so crazy that it's really difficult to get any one image. But you do get these things like you're talking about. And for example, I'm glad you brought up the Jubilee. That's something that needs to be talked about more and more and more. I mean, it needs to be just ruthlessly talked about. You're going to make some very serious enemies when you do that. But debt forgiveness, things like that, they're very, very crucial and important. And you know, you talked about price fixing. We just had one of the biggest scandals. Now, obviously, gold markets, yes, are very, very fixed and manipulated. But the LIBOR scandal that just happened a couple years ago affected the most people on the planet, meaning they were fixing the price of interest rates. LIBOR, the London Interbank rate, they were fixing that and making money off of that. But the Fed is fixed. They make money off of seniorage. So there's all these ways where they're skimming off the top, and they vacuum up enough pennies and they become bajillionaires, you know? So it is a problem. It's
Well, I say that it's a much more controlled fiasco than we like to believe. I mean, I don't see any measure where it's out of control in my personal worldview. I see a bunch of control being made to look like it's just chaos, but in reality, it's all under control. I mean, that's my opinion. And when you say that the United States as we know it will not exist, I would have to say, well, I agree with you to the extent that we're going to an international, I mean, all of the standards and practices and, you know, all these things that actually control the financial accounting structure, they're all going international. So yes. I would say, yes, we're definitely changing as we speak. If we're not already in globalism, it's tomorrow. So, yeah, I mean, in that way, we're certainly changing.
I mean, you and I are so much on the same page. Again, you know, I don't know a lick of the CAFR stuff compared to you guys, but I think it's just absolutely fascinating, mind-boggling. And again, it's this like Matrix kind of metaphor where, you know, there's one reality that you're given, and then the real reality is something completely different.
Yeah.
Here's my one thing about conspiracy. Like, I think it's ridiculous people that scoff at conspiracy, because conspiracy happens all the time. I mean, you and I conspired to appear on the radio together. It wasn't anybody else's business. You privately messaged me, I messaged you back, and we had this conspiracy to be here together right now.
Absolutely. I like to tell people that I was born because of conspiracy between my mother and father.
Right,
it's not a theory, because here I sit.
Right, it's totally ubiquitous, man. It's everywhere. But here's the downfall for those guys. People who are conspiratorial, especially at the higher and higher levels like that where the stakes are high, it's not just about getting laid or appearing on a radio show. The high stakes, like billions of dollars and war and land and, you know, bloodlines and all this other crap, at that level you have to also understand that the conspirers will also begin conspiring against each other. And so you do get a little bit of chaos towards the top where you have rival gangs kind of vying for the same territory. Now they all kind of work together, and then they're like frenemies, you know, like where they work together where it suits them, and then try to sabotage each other. But so here's the one thing: the upside and why Endonomics is actually an optimistic. I call myself in the book an apocalyptimist, because I think that we do have an opportunity with the end of the impending doom of the United States under the weight of its own debt. Being crushed, I think we have an opportunity that from the ashes to either create something that is more in line with individualism and liberty, rather than buying into the globalist power concentrating kind of system that is definitely waiting in the wings. And again, Basel, Switzerland will be the headquarters of all of that, in my opinion. The world central banks. The Bank of International Settlements and those guys. But I'm actually I'm pretty optimistic, only because I look at the millennials, this group coming up after the boomers. I think boomers were too busy either doing drugs in the 60s or too busy buying crap in the 80s and, you know, watching the Cosby Show to really pay attention to what was happening. But the millennials are very skeptical and they're very libertarian, and I'm optimistic. I mean, I don't know if odds are. If I would bet totally that things are going to happen in a positive way, I'm not sure if I'm that optimistic, but I think odds are okay odds. I think we have a chance.
Well, we have to discover what you think is positive. Now, do you think depopulation is going to be a positive thing?
No, but I think that's going to be a real difficult. I don't know that they're going to be able to win. I don't think the eugenicist trope will work. I just
That was
don't
a
see
trick
it.
question, Jake. Just a trick question.
All right.
Just being funny. Speaking of conspiracies, that's one of the biggest and most pronounced ones out there, and a lot of quotes to go with it. So I was just joking with you.
All right. Well,
Just trying to throw you off.
You're one step ahead of me.
All right, folks, when we get back, I'm going to switch this over to, I was going to talk about your book, Anomaly, which I actually read, and I quite enjoyed, although it was pretty heavy as well, just describing the nature of language and all the mistakes we make with it, all the fallacies and everything else. But I really want to, for the benefit of people out there, I want to talk to you about your hypnotism, the shows that you do as a hypnotist, as well as the business you've created around that to actually help people with something that can be used really for very devious purposes. Mental self-defense is the thing that's coming to mind.
Okay.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back. Our long break. You're on RBN.
Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint. Your host with me today is Jake Shannon. JakeShannon.com. We're going to talk about another website of his, which is more close to, I think, his heart, and more close to his business, actually. InstituteForHypnosis.com is that website. Institute for Hypnosis. One of the things that's fascinating about Jake, and it's actually one of the things I gave him some crap about before, because I was really curious. I went to a couple of his meetings that he was, by the way, the name of his radio show that aired here in Utah on the local AM station was Mental Self-Defense Radio. And I was always intrigued by that name, Mental Self-Defense, because nothing can be more true. I mean, let me just give you an idea of the things that are being thrown at you. Just on a mental level, what is being thrown at you now? You're probably not going to recognize most of these things, and this isn't actually from Jake's book, but he'll probably know what they are. Besides the distraction, the programming, the pacing, the leading, you have these flicker rates that induce sort of a trance-like state. We call that trance induction. You have enhanced suggestibility, hypnotic suggestion, Ericksonian techniques, predictive programming, neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, non-dominant hemisphere programming, hidden meanings all over the place, embedded suggestion, subliminal messaging, emotional transfer, psychological warfare. We're all familiar with that, and that's going on every day. Pre-programmed response adaptation, linking statements, causality bridges, subconscious manipulation, just downright duplicity and deception in the media. And it goes on and on and on. These are all forms of mental warfare, in my opinion. Things that are designed to get you to buy, anything from getting you to buy to getting you to hate, to getting you to accept the things that are coming down on you from the what did you call it? The oligarchy, the elite out there, to make you accept the ridiculousn's of what we talked about in the first hour, all this debt and everything else, to make you convinced that it's your debt and not theirs. All of these things are being forced upon you through every possible medium, not just visual, but audio and everything else. So, Jake, you created this concept called mental self-defense, which I really was intrigued by again. And now you have the Institute for Hypnosis. You're actually helping people through hypnosis to help them stop, for instance, smoking and other forms. So why don't we start off by you telling us about your institute? And I see some Latin up here. I'm not going to say it right, so I'll just let you say it. I know you know what I'm talking about. But tell us about your professional business.
Okay, so the Latin that you're speaking of, if you go to instituteforhypnosis.com, you'll see like our little logo, and it has some Latin in the thing, and it's primum non nocebo. That's Latin, and it's kind of an homage to the Hippocratic Oath, which is primum non nocere, which means first do no harm. Well, I tweaked it out because I named it primum non nocebo, the masthead or the logo, the phrase, because the nocebo effect is like the placebo effect. It's actually the opposite of it. So if the placebo effect is where you go to a doctor and you're like, oh, I don't feel well, and he gives you a sugar pill, it's not going to do anything. It's a sugar pill. But just off the belief and the authority that he has as a doctor, you take this sugar pill and you're healed. It's really actually the power of belief. You thought it was going to heal you, so it did heal you. Well, that's the placebo effect. The nocebo effect is the opposite. I give you a sugar pill. It's totally inert. It's not going to do anything except maybe give you a couple calories. It's like a Tic Tac. But I tell you it's highly poisonous and toxic, and then you get sick because of the belief. That's the nocebo effect. So it's where you take something that's inert and whatever, and it becomes harmful just because of the belief. So primum non nocebo is, first do no harm through beliefs, if that makes any sense. So it's just me trying to be clever and try to integrate the Hippocratic Oath, which kind of has this libertarian sensibility of not doing any harm to anybody.
I'll tell you what. The first time I went to one of your classes that you were giving, which was the mental self-defense, I sort of gave you a little bit of hell, because I was like, how can you were actually teaching people not the full concept of hypnosis, but you were teaching people the basics of hypnosis, how to use it for good. But I was like, well, Jake, isn't this a little irresponsible that you're teaching people about hypnosis, because there's so many people that would use it. For instance, there's a whole subculture of dating with hypnosis where you hypnotize a girl and make her
pickup artists.
Right. There's so many different things you can do with hypnosis for bad that I was kind of like, isn't it irresponsible? And I ask you that today, not out of any, I don't mean any offense. I'm just asking, is it not a little frightening to think that people can learn hypnosis in the way that you have and utilize it for, I can only say evil purposes, I guess.
Well, okay, so there's a couple things. First of all, I mean, you gave me a hard time. That's fine. I mean, one of the things that I value in you as a friend is that you're not, that you're critical and you think critically of things. So I don't take anything personal, and obviously we've been friends for years. So, but here's the deal. Think of it, and this is why I came up with the term self-defense, because as I started extrapolating scenarios and looking down the chessboard at how this was operating, I look at it very much like normal self-defense, like the Second Amendment, that the way to fight this is by arming yourself. It's not by trying to make guns illegal or to, make them hard to get or obscure or people scared of them, but instead to educate people about it so they can use these guns for good, because they're going to be out there whether you like it or not. So you might as well be a good guy with this ability. And so that's really what the origins of it, because I did see it being used in ways that were manipulative. And even if you're not interested in doing anything with hypnosis or NLP or anything of that nature, and I don't blame you, most people aren't, but there are some people that are. Some of them are pickup artists. Some of them are, they use it a lot in sales. So if you've ever had buyer's remorse and bought like a used car and it was a lemon or something, they may have been using some of these NLP techniques. Obviously, the government
just to verify that, my parents bought an $1,800 cooking set at a fair in Sacramento, and I tried to tell them, look, you were a victim of something called NLP. Neurolinguistic programming. They literally got you to buy the things by basically putting in suggestions. Now, they didn't believe me at the time, and until they met my cousin actually married a guy in Las Vegas, and he is a professional magician and / NLP master. And when I went down there, he actually came to Christmas, and he basically did exactly that. He put suggestions in everybody's heads way before he did the trick. And then when he asked you for a number between 1 and 100, you said 54, exactly like he instructed you or programmed you to do. And this is happening on a continuous basis, which is why this concept of mental self-defense is so important. And trust me, folks, I always consider myself a Gumby. I can't be hypnotized. I'm too conscious. That's what I thought until I met this guy. And he pulled every trick in the book on me. And I just still, to this day, can't figure out how I didn't see the programming happen, you know? So
yeah, I mean, that's what I really saw, is I saw that there's kind of this, you know, I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. And so I'm always looking for kind of holes, things, you know, a vacuum to fill with to help people. And I saw that, you know, there was a lot of people, it was like a lot of people were selling the guns to the bad guys, but nobody was selling the guns to the good guys. And
hey,
so that's
Jake,
kind of,
I'm sorry, man. Hold that thought. We'll continue after the break here. Stay tuned, folks.
It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water, like water. Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Running water never goes stale, so you gotta just keep on flowing, keep on.
Hey, folks, welcome back.
You gotta just keep on.
We're the Corporation Nation. Oh, good times. Jake's really good having you on the show, man. Definitely have to have you back. There's so much to talk about. But you were saying, as far as teaching hypnosis goes, it's basically a case where you have to learn it to understand how it affects you in order to avoid or to defend against it, mental self-defense, right?
yeah. So, and by the way, really cool Bruce Lee song there. That's cool. So I really like this metaphor that I use of mental self-defense because, you know, let's say you go to a physical self-defense class. You go there, and you're not necessarily wanting to become like an MMA athlete where it's like you're professional. You just want to learn some tricks to defend yourself. You're not going to go out and bully people or rob banks with it or anything like that. But when you go to these physical self-defense classes or whatever, you learn to punch and to kick and to wrestle and to throw and to twist limbs and poke eyes and all that kind of stuff. And all they're doing is arming you because the bad guys are going to be armed. So it's very much like, again, a self-defense argument. It's kind of a Second Amendment argument. And I really look at like the First Amendment and the Second Amendment kind of mixed together in this concept of mental self-defense, about it being really ultimately about language. And so, you know, it's interesting because Anomaly is the book that kind of introduced us to each other, because I spoke at your Axiom conference because of the Anomaly book. And in that book, you know, I did a couple things, and again, you're right, it is a bit thick, and I tried to make it as accessible as I can, but the field that I was addressing is called the philosophy of science and also the rhetoric of science. And I wanted to educate people. I have all these ideas for these books in my head. But that was the first one I was like, boy, I need to get this one out in case I get hit by a bus or something, because in my opinion, this is the really important stuff for people. And it really laid out the framework for this concept of mental self-defense. One of the methods in mental self-defense is actually knowing the techniques of the bad guys, or not necessarily bad guys. I mean, I don't think guns are bad per se. So learning hypnosis, and there are a million great and positive uses for hypnosis, from pain management to changing behaviors to just feeling relaxed and calm. You know, I mean, stress is such a big problem in our world. So there's all kinds of great things and positive things, and that's really why I started the Institute for Hypnosis, to help people either as a hypnotist or to help teach people become hypnotists and to use it for positivity. But mental self-defense has people understand that, because, you know, they say that you can't be hypnotized against your will, And that's kind of true. You need to add a clause to that to make it totally true. You can't be hypnotized against your will if you're aware that you're being hypnotized. And the only way you'll be aware of it is if you know the techniques. So the one leg of mental self-defense is this being aware of their techniques. Again, the analogy to self-defense, what they call situational awareness in physical self-defense, same thing mentally. You just have a situational awareness. So if you go into a sales meeting or some gold digger is trying to, seduce you out of your money and your house or something, that you don't get suckered.
Well, is it safe to say that there's a bit of, if you will, sort of like in politics, there's a bit of manufactured consent,
Yes.
Where people sort of freely accept the techniques of hypnosis and NLP without even realizing it?
Yeah, so a lot of it, again, it's just like any scam. Like, so if I'm some rube that goes to New York and I'm sitting on the subway in the back and these kids are playing 3-card Monte and I have no clue that that's just a scam, I'm going to lose my money if because they make it seem like I'm going to come out the winner. But if I know it's a scam, I'm just not going to get involved. And that's kind of what that side of the mental self-defense is about. Now, the other leg, so if you actually get the Anomaly book, which I published in 2009, I can't believe it's 5 years old already, but if you'll see there's a good chapter on hypnosis in there, but then there's also a section that introduces this idea of the trivium, which I'm thrilled to see that you're, and I went to the website promoting your show, that you're talking about that, because the trivium is the other leg of mental self-defense. And I'm really excited because, again, like the Tea Party book that I wrote, Teocon, it was the first book on the Tea Party. When I published Anomaly, nobody in the Liberty movement was writing about the trivium. Nobody. And now there's like all these websites. And to be honest, so, I have some problems with some of them, but I'm glad that at least that people are talking about it and it's getting out there, and hopefully people can try to... Well,
it's a tool, and you always have to be careful how you apply it and how it's applied to you. It's as simple as that. You have to be
absolutely.
on the fence. Yeah.
But in the book, I also address the trivium and some of the other portions of mental self-defense, like understanding the informal fallacies in logic and
yes,
and how grammar operates. So
in my opinion, understanding the fallacies is perhaps number one on my list of things to defend yourself, honestly.
Yeah, no, and that's great, especially in the age of the internet. I would concur that your first probably thing is just, and you can go find there's tons of it on the internet for free. Just type in informal fallacies and things like ad hominem, ad baculum. There's a ton of different, post hoc, ergo propter hoc, all these different, they have these Latin names, but they're really simple concepts and they explain it well online. There's tons of them. But I'm stoked to see people talking about it and stoked to see people taking charge of these things this way. The thing that you have to understand about hypnosis and trance, when I was a kid, when I was 15, I had cancer and had to do the chemotherapy and radiation surgeries, all that kind of stuff. Well, I was very fortunate that my oncologist, my cancer doctor, suggested I look into hypnosis to help deal with some of the trauma, the mental trauma and the physical pain and things. And I've never looked back. So since I was 15, I've been dabbling and looking and researching and applying and all this stuff. And it's a really positive thing. And the thing people don't realize, it's like most things that people don't know about. They kind of maybe fear it sometimes. And you shouldn't, because trance or hypnosis are the most natural phenomenon. It's funny how many people come to me for all kinds of different stuff. I mean, I see your average mom and pop type of person. I see Olympic athletes. I see professional athletes. But a lot of them come to me and they're like, oh yeah, I can't be hypnotized. And the easiest litmus test to see whether or not you've ever been hypnotized is to just consider if you've ever read a book or watched a movie and laughed or cried. Because if you did, you were hypnotized. It's no more complicated than that, and it is. So if that demystifies hypnosis or makes movies and books mystical somehow, I don't know. But
well, and I guess the more that you think that you can't be hypnotized, probably the more danger you're in. The more confidence you have that, that stuff can't affect me, probably means that you're being affected more than you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think people make it seem like it's something esoteric and uncommon, but it is it is how we think. I mean, I radically think in terms of hypnosis. I see the world in terms of trance, and it's okay. There are good trances and bad trances. And, Hitler was a hypnotist. Obama was a hypnotist. Ron Paul was a hypnotist. Now, some of these guys are good guys and some of them are bad guys, right? Obviously. But it's all about using language to affect somebody to take action, really. And ultimately, every person listening right now that uses language is a hypnotist, even to themselves, right? Because we talk to ourselves, and negative self-talk or positive self-talk, it's all suggesting and making us behave in certain ways and feel certain ways.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we'll come back and we'll take some calls. People have questions about this. Very fascinating concept, hypnotism. Stay tuned, folks.
And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart, closer to the heart. The blacksmith and the artist reflected in their art.
All right, folks, welcome back. Oh, good times. Jake Shannon, JakeShannon.com, and hypnosis. Shoot. Of course, my computer's giving me hell. Institute for Hypnosis.com. Jake, we're going to take some calls, but first, when you're talking about, say, a president like Obama or Bush or any of those guys using this kind of hypnosis, this kind of programming, they're doing so not only with actions like hand movements and everything else, but also with words. And I don't think a lot of people realize that a big part of being inducted into this type of trance state in the negative it often involves just words, even when they're read off a page. When you actually read the words off a page, you can be inducted into a sort of hypnotic trance. Explain that for people.
Well, the thing that you have to understand is that, think about breathing. You can go 30 days without food. You can go 3 days without water. You can go 3 hours and off of weather without shelter. But you can go less than 3 minutes without breathing. It's like our most important and immediate connection to life, and yet people take it for granted. We don't even think twice about it. Heck, you can fall asleep and you'll still be breathing automatically. You don't even unconsciously. You don't even have to think about it. Well, in the same way that the air is everywhere, and because of that we kind of take it for granted, that's what happens with words. They're very, very powerful, and yet because they're everywhere, we just don't really even pay attention to it. And think of it this way. You go to the grocery store and you don't have your grocery list, right? You talk to yourself. You're like, oh, what am I here to get? Diapers, potatoes, bread. You talk to yourself. Your kids are bugging you, and you don't tell them to shut up because you can't smell yourself think or see yourself think. You say you can't hear yourself. You can't have that self-conversation. And because of that, thought is largely self-dialogue and auto-dialogue inside. And what can happen with words, whether they're written or spoken or sung, is they can hijack that inner conversation. Because, for example, again, just to put it in kind of common sense terms, you can't have two conversations at the same time, right? If I have two people vying for my attention, I'm trying to have two conversations, I just can't do it. So I have to shut out one and focus on the other. Well, when I start reading somebody else's words, whether it's an advertiser or a political speech or some author, my thoughts get bumped to the background a lot of times. And so those become what affect me. And that's the same if you're listening right now, somebody in the radio that's actually listening and not zoned out on Facebook or something like that. If they're actually listening to us, they can't be having their own conversation. So this is a very common thing. And it's not just hypnotists. It's anybody that's like a preacher and they've got just a really powerful speaking presence, or a really brilliant author. I look at them all as the same thing. We just call them different words, but it's the same phenomenon, and it taps into how we think, and that's largely through language and symbols.
Symbology, very, very, very important as well. Oh, my goodness. All right, folks, we got 3 callers on the line. We'll see if we can get through them here. Let's start with Barrett in Arizona. Barrett, welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good.
I listen to Alex Jones. I listen to Rush Limbaugh. I listen to Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, they seem to talk about each other, but not want to talk about each other. And I tend to sway, because I heard Ben Gleck earlier talking about, Alex Jones a warhead, he wants to start a civil war and all this. And the media is trying to make Mr. Bundy, Clevens, whatever his first name is, to be a racist. It may just be his terminology. I don't think he's racist. I don't know, maybe he is. I really don't know the man. But my question is who really knows the truth? Because it is an info wars, an information wars.
Well, first of all, I don't know how I got mixed up with these names. I shudder to think that I'm anywhere even close to those names, but or that I'm associated with them.
They're nowhere near any of those guys.
Thank God. But the fact that the association, I guess, bothers me. But what would you say to that, Jake?
Okay, here's my advice for you. There's a difference between, this is something I find a lot of times, that in this info war, whatever the heck you want to call it, propaganda or persuasion or whatever, everybody lays claim to quote unquote the truth. You hear that, run the other way, first of all, okay? That's when your mental self-defense shields should go up full bore. The second thing is, listen, we all have our own little independent, what Robert Anton Wilson, a great author, calls reality tunnels. Meaning, you're sitting where you are, I'm sitting here in Salt Lake, Clinton's sitting at his place in Draper, and we're all having this conversation, and we all have 5 senses, maybe there's more, who knows, but let's just assume there's 5 senses that we know of. And each of us see things, and we don't know what's going on, to be honest. I mean, let's just be really real here. Because the TV presents things that it wants you to know. It doesn't show you everything. There's no such thing as omniscience. There's just different perspectives. So, for me, listening to the media and listening to guys like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and all that, man, it's depressing, man. I don't want to listen to all those wackos and their own biases and weird things that they're into. I've already got enough of my own stuff going on, so I just try to put it in the right place. I don't really give them much credit and much credibility. I just okay, maybe they have something interesting to say, a perspective I hadn't thought of, but you need to maintain a priority of your own thoughts and your own views.
I guess I'd interject. I would say that you have to understand the difference between truth and reality. They are 2 different concepts. Reality is what is actually happening out there, regardless of what you believe. Truth is the perception of reality that everybody has, and everybody's truth is in some function different. Even mine and Jake's, when we agree on so many things, we still disagree on a lot of things. So his truth is going to be different than my truth. Reality, however, will never change. So there's to listen to Alex Jones's truth compared to my truth. Don't listen to truth. Focus on reality. What is reality despite the perception of truth? And I also say, don't forget that whatever a jury of your peers decides in court, as idiotic as they are, is the truth of the court. And that can only be as good as the evidence that is provided. If the evidence is bad, if the grammar, if you will, is bad, then your truth is going to be incorrect, and reality will still shine.
I guess we're all right in the mirror, but I'm in neutral because I know there's an info war, and that's not because I agree totally with Alex. I agree with him more than I do, except for Coast to Coast, which is on from Coast to Coast has a guy named, he's from my hometown, Portland, Oregon. He does a program from Coast to Coast. It's called Ground Zero. That's very good. It's on AM. If anybody wants to know how to find the radio station or listen to it on the phone or my phone is my computer because I'm broke.
You certainly get around, though.
Yeah, but I just think that I don't know. They're all right.
Well, here's the thing. I don't mean to interrupt. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to maybe put you at ease a little bit. Yeah, and whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it propaganda or an info war, every single person you're going to meet is self-interested. That's just us being biological organisms. We want to satisfy our hunger and our thirst, and we all want to get laid, and we all have these competing different interests. And everybody's going to try to use language and communication to their benefit. So what you have to do is just try to be a good person. Make sure that you take care of yourself and your family, and then when you have a little extra left over, try to help other people. I mean, I think that you just have to be wary of adopting too much of anything that you haven't witnessed yourself with your own eyes.
Well, I want to say this last thing. They're trying to demonize Bundy for being racist.
All right, bud, we got to go to break. I'm sorry. We'll come back and let you finish your thought. Stay tuned, folks.
Did you see the frightened ones? Did you hear the falling bombs? Did you ever wonder why we had to run for shelter when the promise of a brave new world unfurled beneath the clear blue sky?
Look, Mummy, there's no place.
Chaos theory, hurricane control, advanced cloud seas, massive ionospheric heaters, storm-absorbing supergels, nanoscale weather machines. All of these technologies exist in some form today.
All right, folks, welcome back here in the Corporation Nation. Our guest today has been Jake Shannon. Now, Jake, if someone wants to contact you and get a little help, I see you do something called Skype-nosis, which sounds pretty interesting. But if people need to get in touch with you, maybe want some help, stop smoking, that sort of thing, how should they contact you?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or, if I can be of any help in anything that we talked about, if you go to the website, jakeshannon.com, there's links at the bottom that have all my social media. And I'm fairly active on that, so I'll get a hold. You can get a hold of me that way. Info@jakeshannon.com. That's my direct email, and I read that or reply to everything. So those are probably the best ways.
Cool beans. I also see you have a book called it's a pretty new book, The Hypnotist, Healer, Head Hacker, and Headliner, that came out in 2013. So there's that if you want to read more on the hypnotism thing. Back to our caller, Barrett. We got some other callers, so what else did you want to say real quick?
I'll be quick. John F. Kennedy, before I was born, about a year, 63, he was shot in the face and by supposedly, what's his name, Lee Harvey Oswald. He didn't do it. But I believe that. John F. Kennedy was in the process, although he was still working with the elites to rip the American people off. He was doing halfway. But he was in the process of shutting down the Federal Reserve and the income tax, all the stuff that was enacted in 1913, and he ends up dead. Alex Jones and Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh are maybe still alive because they've sold themselves out. And it's such a deep mind trip that they're trying to put us through. You look at the courts. These lawyers, these so-called public pretenders, these stand-up comedians, they want you to take a deal because they could not ever take on all the cases. I don't care if it's traffic or a felony or whatever. They can't do it. So they keep you in jail, like me, because my. Well, anyway, that's a whole other thing. But
yeah, we gotta get to our other callers.
Okay, all right, I'll call you y'all back some other time.
Sounds good. I mean, I understand your. I mean, the point is well taken. Certainly, what happened that day has been ingrained into our minds. As far as the radio show hosts you mentioned, one gets paid $10 million, one gets paid $8 million, and one has 20 corporations that pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars every month. So, I don't know what to say. I have no corporations, and I'm just here to talk about reality. So, let's go to Fred in Iowa. Welcome to the show, Fred.
Hi, Clint.
Howdy.
Jake, I think I know where you're coming from. I got some notes written down here. Yoga, TV, alpha state, cognitive dissidents, fast talkers. Do not engage seducing spirits. Where does the power come from? Now, I'm strongly opposed to hypnotism. And about 30 years ago, I read some books, taught myself self-hypnosis. Hypnotized my girlfriend about 5 or 6 times, and then I hypnotized 4 other women. At the time, I was agnostic at best, and I'm a Christian now, and I've never heard anything from Christians about do hypnosis or not. I will not use it on anybody.
Are you saying that you were being a dirty bird and hypnotizing women for devious purposes?
No, I better explain that. When first time I went to hypnotize my girlfriend, something came over me. And I wasn't a Christian then. But this came over me strongly. And do no harm. Do no harm. And so therefore, anyhow, what I understood at the time, to get people relaxed. And the more people trust you, the easier it is. And anybody can be hypnotized, even super intellects. But out of the 5 women that I hypnotized, they were extremely relaxed after I brought them out of it. I will never do it again. Now, I tell people when I call into RBN, you hear the cliche, read between the lines. Well, I say, listen between the words, and especially fast talkers, because cognitive dissonance is happening. In other words, they're giving out 2 and 3 opposing messages at the same time. And I still get taken down the primrose path, and I'm on guard for it. But I've got a kind of a rule of thumb that you let a person talk long enough, you're going to know where they come from. But you've got to be somewhat cognizant of what Jake is talking about. And we all have our self-conversations all the time. I follow and understand that. And frankly, if I say this, and I really don't like saying it, I think I have the ability to use it. But I will not. And how I get my confidence, how I try to understand, is through prayer. But to reiterate, I think it's extremely dangerous because you're opening yourself up to a very foreign, terrible building.
Yeah, this was one of the concerns that I had with, pretty much the similar conversation I had with Jake. And the only reason that I promote Jake is because I do know him. I trust him. People that have actually benefited from his particular professional services, not just, he does do a magic show, actually, which is actually kind of funny. But I'll tell you what, Jake, not to give away your secret, but tell people how you actually, when you do a hypnosis show and you have a big group and audience, it's pretty much the same as any gangster would, or person that's going to use hypnosis in a bad way would do in public. They would go and they would seek out the very small percentage of the population that is very easily induced into a trance. You do that before a show, correct?
Yeah. So, and to your caller's concern, the one thing that I would just recommend is that you speak about hypnosis the same way you speak about guns. If you believe that you have the right to defend yourself, then you should be also defending the positive and sincere use of hypnosis. It's not the hypnosis itself. It's like guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's not hypnosis itself. And I might argue that even prayer is kind of a form of hypnosis. Now, I don't want to get bogged down into a debate with that, but just something for people to consider. Now, when you do a stage show, you have to understand that it's just like, again, a movie or a book. If I have 100 people go see Star Trek, out of that movie, or out seeing Star Trek, 90 of them will be like, yeah, it was a cool movie. But 10 of those people that go see that movie start speaking Klingon and going to conferences, okay? Because out of any group, about 10 to 20% are more suggestible. It's a part of human nature. So what we have to do is just admit that this is a part of being human and protect ourselves and try to protect the people we love. And that's it. I mean, I'm very cautious about people being so scared of it and warning people about it because it's a very natural thing. And it to me personally, from my perspective as a hypnotist and helping people, I look at it almost like a gun advocate. Like, really, you're warning about guns. I mean, the bad guys are going to have it, so you should have it.
Well, to be fair, Jake, I mean, the whole purpose of mental self-defense is to warn people against it by teaching them how good it actually can be, and so you are actually technically warning people against it in a way to help them.
Yes, that it can be used for good or for evil.
Right, and that's the whole point of this. And there's so much more we can talk about, Jake. I really appreciate you joining me today. Give out your websites one last time for people.
Probably the easiest general one is just jakeshannon.com. You can also go to instituteforhypnosis.com, and I'm all over the social media as well. Thanks a ton.
Absolutely, man. Again, folks, I will be posting Daniel's letter today. We'll have Daniel on the show tomorrow, and a very long post that I'll be posting along with Daniel's letter. So 2 posts coming up tonight. Thanks, Jake. Take care, folks.